All right, I believe we are live. Let me get this open. Yes, we are. So, as you guys know, my laptop situation here is not a fan of having the YouTube open as well as the Hangouts. So I have my handy dandy phone here to check out the chat. So, oh my goodness, already Trashman4444 says, hello, Dolly. Oh my goodness, there's so many of you here already. So, hello to Gun Websites. We have Corey Gardner, Mike Vasquez is here, Dale Stark, and Argo Davies. I always get so excited when there's women in here. Josh Hutchins. Hey, buddy. Tim Allen is here. Joseph Crackle. I never know how to say your name. I'm sorry. So we have a whole bunch of regulars. Mandatory Carrie is here. He is the one, Daisy, that actually suggested that you come on the show. So we can thank him for that.
We can.
Brother Nero, QQQ1701, Psycho Chicken. Oh my goodness. Andrew Scriber, thank you very much for your generosity. Fit and Fire is here. He told me he was going to be on. So we've got a whole bunch of people on today. So my guest today, this is actually, I was just telling her, Daisy Cousens. She is the first person to come on my live stream that is not already a friend of mine. So this is exciting. We're talking to strangers today. So Daisy, for people that aren't familiar, if you'd like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your work and what you do.
Well, hello, everybody. And hello to Mandatory Carrie as well, I have to say. He's a regular on my live streams as well. Thank you for teeing up this meeting. We're both very pleased you suggested it. So obviously my name is Daisy Cousens. I did not start out as a YouTube commentator in terms of sort of social commentary. I actually started out as a writer. And even before that, I was an actress, believe it or not. I wanted to be a musical theater performer, but I moved on from that industry because it's very hard to get work, particularly in Australia. And also the people are just awful.
I do have to say, not to interrupt, but when I was researching you, what popped up was an IMDb that featured something called The Wiggles.
Oh, yes. I was a Wiggle kid. Yeah. When I was a very small child, I did Irish dancing in 2 of the Wiggles videos when I was like 6 or 7, like really, really young. And so did my sister. And I still have memories of making those videos. And I was like, I adored Captain Feathersword. And I was so pleased because I got to be in a number with him dressed as a pirate, and I had my own little feather sword that I would do sort of roly-polies with. And they put me right at the front next to Captain Feathersword, and you would not have found a happier 6-year-old ever in that moment.
That's kind of amazing. So clearly you started young with being in the spotlight.
I suppose you could say that. Yeah. But no, I always wanted to be a performer. But then the people in musical theater industry, it's the same as Hollywood. They're just the most appallingly self-righteous, regressive, leftist social justice warriors who think they're so informed because they watch Q&A every Monday night. And Q&A, for anyone who doesn't know, is like, it's like Question Time in the UK, if you know what that is. It's a big sort of political panel show that's like veers significantly to the left. So conservatives, when they get asked on it, they shudder.
I would imagine it's kind of like maybe the American NPR. Like that's how you know you're woke in America, is if you listen to NPR.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. And I moved out of there because I'm like, I can't stand you people. All you do is fight with me on Facebook, and I can't actually say anything around you because I know you will just never speak to me again, which happens a lot with those people. So, I moved away from that, and I've always loved to write. Like I've always like from when I was a little kid. So I did. I went back to university, which is college. And I did a Master of Creative Writing because in Australia, we have this thing called HEX, which is like a government loan system. You can defer your payment up front for any university course that's sponsored by the government, and then you pay it back later and when you reach a certain income threshold. It's a nifty kind of system, and it's a balance between having total like Bernie Sanders free education and having to pay everything up front. So it's quite good. So yeah, I did that and I absolutely loved it. And I started sort of moving into writing for a women's magazine. And from there, I moved into political commentary for The Spectator and for Quadrant magazine. And then, speaking of Q&A, that was actually my first television gig. The producers heard an interview that I did on ABC Radio and said, "Hey, look, do you want to be on the show?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I am so terrified right now," because they asked me just after Donald Trump had won the 2016 election. And the climate in Australia, Australians are very invested in American politics, people who are politically active, very invested, because we get so much American popular culture here and so much American news that there's a cultural flow-on effect, definitely. And the climate, people were so angry. Like it was literally like the social justice warriors were in America. And I knew that the audience would just be absolutely feral because there's a live audience. And I couldn't do, I was engaged in the evening. Like I was doing something in the evening. They first asked me, but then they asked me again. And I'm like, well, I've got no excuses now. Have to do it. But it was a terrific opportunity. And I knew that. And it's got a really big viewership for Australia. So I did it and I struggled through. I somehow got through it. The feminists on Twitter hated me instantly. And there was like so much bitchy comment from like these Generation X women who were like, why are all the women on the panel right wing? There are no role models up there at all. Like all that. It was really, really funny. But that's what kickstarted my commentary career. And I ended up getting some freelance gigs on other stations. And then Sky News Australia eventually offered me a home and regular spots there. And Sky News gets compared to Fox News a lot. It's Australia's answer to Fox. Okay. And certainly they were owned by the same person for a while, Rupert Murdoch. And daytime Sky is really just your sort of standard journalism. But then they have this thing that was unofficially titled Sky After Dark by the leftist Twitterati in Australia, which I really like. It's like Sky After Dark. And it was meant to be a disparaging thing, but I'm like, no, I like it. And that's where you get like your really quite center-right, very unashamed right-wing commentary. And so from then it was just sort of, given the way that news is presented nowadays in the online sphere, it was sort of a natural progression to move into YouTube, because I had all this skill I'd acquired of talking to camera. And I had lots of people going, you should do it. That's where it is. You know, you can really, get a following. It'll be bigger than your TV audience. And so I did. And here I am talking to you. That's my career progression squashed into a nutshell.
Well, that is quite the progression.
Yeah, it's a weird and wacky, wild story.
And I do want to apologize real quick. There's some people in the chat here talking about technical difficulties. I have no idea what's going on. I don't know. Apparently it's like locking screen and not switching back and forth. But, oh, well, okay. He says it's fixed, but that's probably because I've actually been clicking back and forth on the different screens here. But so you have had quite the adventure, actually. And so is there really that much of a market for more conservative politics in Australia? Or is it just like that one program, one network?
Well, it's people in Australia, I think, are desperate for an opposing opinion in the media, because Australia we live in a welfare state. So our politics is very centrist. There's very little sort of political polarization or extremism on either side, which is great, like very fortunate in that way. But there's a group of very, very noisy so-called progressives, as there is, just in Western culture. And of course, it's exactly the same as America. They have the media, they have the universities, and of course they have social media. And they're very, very kind of clubby and noisy, but there are actually hardly any of them. But because they are so noisy and aggressive and occupy these positions of power, they absolutely dictate the cultural narrative in this country. And so a lot of people who aren't even conservative, they're just normal, get very normal people who are sort of apolitical and turn on Channel 10 and see all this kind of lefty stuff and go, oh, don't know about that. That sounds a bit weird, but I don't have anyone telling me anything else, because Sky is cable TV. So it's not free to air. You have to have a cable subscription to watch it. So people are desperate for that opposing opinion. And we know this because we just had an election recently, which was sort of a kind of Trump upset moment, in the fact that our Labour Party, which is the left-wing major party, was like pegged as the major favorite to win. All the polls said they were going to win. The Liberal Party, which is ironically our Conservative Party, because we use the word liberal differently in Australia.
Probably that. Well, so that's probably they're using it the way that liberal was originally used, like back in the day before the Democrats took over and murdered it and raped it, basically.
The Democrats hijacked it to make themselves sound more palatable, is the way that I sort of interpret that. But we use it in the sort of classical liberal sense of the word. They had a disaster last year because they knifed their sitting prime minister for the second time in like 6 years. Because you can do that in Australia, because we have prime minister, not a president. We vote for the party through our elected member rather than the person. So the party decides who is actually leading. We just vote for the party. So they can knife whoever they want, even if they are the sitting leader of the country. And people were very annoyed with that, as you can imagine, because it's like the second time they've done it in 6 years. And so, the polls were terrible, but the Labour Party somehow lost the election. And they lost it because they kept shrieking about climate change, and they wanted to put like a gender identity committee on, and they kept demonizing coal. And in my home state of Queensland, there's a lot of coal miners. There's a lot of industrial workers who used to vote Labor. They all voted Liberal. It was like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So when this result came, it was nuts. And I vaguely predicted it, but most people were like, nah, Liberals have no chance of winning. And it's because people are so sick of this narrative that gets pushed at them in the media, and they know that it's not real. Like, they know that it's flawed, and they're desperate for other people to give them other information. So I found that there is definitely a market in Australia for it, because, people who aren't political at all watch my videos and go, look, I don't necessarily agree with everything that you say, but really, I thank you for making it, because it's important for me to hear that information from, that other perspective.
Wow, that is not how things are here at all. Well, so, I mean, at least it doesn't seem like that's the way things are here, because there is such this media bias. All the main media networks, your CNN, your ABC, NBC, what have you, are all very liberal tilted. And I, unfortunately, live behind enemy lines in the state of Massachusetts, which is very, 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 very blue. We are the state of Elizabeth Warren. And so, I mean, I don't know if I'm so much in a bubble, or if that's the way things are everywhere in the States. But there is no, oh, well, thank you for making that, even though I don't agree with it, I should have this information. It's more, it's so polarized that there was a study that was done recently that looked at people's views of the other party. And one of the most polarized states is Massachusetts, to the point where as a therapist, I have people coming in, and I don't like to use the Trump derangement syndrome, because I feel like it's minimizing and dismissive, and it would probably be pretty unethical for me to use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I have people, at least 2 or 3 sessions a week, people coming in and basically saying, oh man, the world is ruined now, and it's Trump's fault, and it's Republicans' fault. And if I ever found out that one of my family members was Republican, I would disown them. I would never talk to them again. People talking about how, they just want to like bash people's brains in if they find out they're Republican. And I don't identify as Republican. I'm a libertarian, but they view libertarians the same way. If you didn't vote for Bernie or Hillary, you are basically a racist criminal, and there is no gray area. At least that's how it is in Massachusetts. I have no idea if other people are experiencing things that way in the rest of the country, but it is intense, and people don't leave room for getting opposing views or other information or learning other perspective. It's just not even anywhere remotely within their worldview. It's really unfortunate. So I'm jealous of your Australian politics.
Well, yeah, no, we're lucky in Australia. We've never had any kind of major political upheaval. There's never been any kind of huge civil war. You know, we were founded by convicts, basically. So, you know, there's always been this kind of get your hands dirty thing about the working class. You know, that you've got your factions of crazies. Like if you went to Melbourne, for instance, which is the capital of Victoria, then yeah, it's the same as Massachusetts, though. Okay. So the cities, particularly Sydney and like Melbourne, is like a green left at a federal political level. Their like main sitting member is in the Greens, which are like to the left of Bernie.
Oh my God, that's a thing? That's terrifying.
That's the thing. Yeah. Australia is by and large less conservative generally than the US is. And I get a little bit frustrated at that sometimes, because it's really easy then to demonize your average center-right person as like a racist, bigot, homophobe, because there's not that kind of American traditionalism in Australia. We weren't sort of founded that way, and we're a much younger country. So I think because we don't have big networks of just your stock standard center-right talking, because a lot of them aren't brave enough, which is understandable, it's much easier to paint them in a negative light. But certainly if you go to Melbourne and you hang around the middle of Sydney, yeah, you'll find it like Massachusetts. But people in Australia are pretty relaxed. They're a bit more relaxed than Americans are, so they're more likely to go.
I think everyone is probably more relaxed than Americans are.
That's a good observation. Very good observation.
So speaking of, this one little, microcosm here where it's easy for one side to demonize the other, when I was looking at some of your work and your articles, I stumbled into like this whole slew of articles circa like April 2017.
Yeah.
Didn't really go outside of that, but it called you alt-right or like pseudo alt-right or alt-light, and it didn't really give any explanation as to why they were saying it. They were just like, oh, this is a fact. This person is alt-right, and demonize. And so is that something that happens to you often? I'm sure it was some great publicity, actually.
Well, did you notice that all of the articles were written by women who are feminists?
I did not. Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah. And now there is a story behind that little microcosm, specifically in April 2017. Now, in March, from the day I was on Q&A, which was the day I started TV, February 6th, 2017, there is a particular feminist in Australia called Clementine Ford. And she's like an extreme third wave, militant, radical feminist.
Her name even sounds feminist.
Yes, Clementine Ford. And she's very popular within her contingent of fans. But outside of that, like even and often, especially people on the left, like just the sensible center left, can't stand her because she tweets stuff like kill all men as a joke. And this is just a joke, it's like, yes, but the fact you're making that joke is not a very nice thing to do.
Yay, murder!
Yeah, murder, exactly. No, she's big on demonizing men, and she claims she's not. And I'm like, honey, have you read your own articles? Have you read your own books? Like, seriously. But she's that kind of feminist, and she loathes women on the right more than she loathes men. Like, she's notorious for ratting on and piling on and dogpiling online women who disagree with her. And yeah, like she's one of those feminists and will just unashamedly do it. And when I came on Q&A with my long brown hair and my frilly dress and my red lipstick looking so feminist.
How dare you?
How dare I look like, not dressed like a glorified man to go on TV? And she's like the no shaved legs, doesn't care about her weight, kind of no makeup feminist. She's like a caricature of herself. She compulsively tweeted about me more than anyone else on the panel, and then spent the next 2 months. And I'd never spoken to her in my life, never interacted with her, never met her, never talked to her online, never. She spent the next 2 months whipping up this frenzy of all of her supporters, and it was majorly punching down. She had like 70,000 followers at the time. I had under 2,000, and she was influencing all of her followers to dogpile and harangue and harass. And there was a particularly bad moment in March where I wrote this obit about a gentleman who died, a cartoonist who I met once and was absolutely, when you meet a rock star or your idol and you're just completely overwhelmed by this person.
I didn't read it anywhere because I couldn't, it was hard to find original copies of it or things like that, but I saw it referenced a lot of places as the sexy, explicit, erotic obituary. And I'm like, where is this? I want to see what this is.
Not at all. It was literally the most, it was a very kind of emotional retelling of how I felt when I met him and how I felt cheated that I'd only got to meet him the once, because I thought he could have been a wonderful mentor for me starting out. But because it was quite emotional, it wasn't my normal kind of hard-hitting thing. They were able, because they're such idiots, they can't actually counter any kind of political argument that I made. It was the first one that they were able to attack, because they wouldn't have to counter any kind of academic argument. So because that whole Twitter group, Clementine, there's another woman called Dee Madigan, she's another feminist, because they are so immature and see everything through the prism of sex, they projected this sort of sexual narrative onto it. And I was floored by it. I thought, how on earth have you got anything to do with sex out of this sweet little emotional obit I wrote at midnight when I was sad? You see how these people think?
Right. Well, I think it was it BuzzFeed? There was one, it was either BuzzFeed or something BuzzFeed-esque that did have screenshots that you couldn't click on. So it was like itty bitty bitty trying to read it. And they're like, old version and new version, and saying that it was changed. But the excerpts that they showed, I didn't see anything particularly erotic or anything. Like it was like, oh, beautiful Daisy. And it's like, well, gee, if that is what they consider erotic and sensual and risque, no wonder they think that catcalling is rape.
Oh, that's an excellent point. Yeah, they view everything through the prism of sex, either because they're not getting any or they're getting too much. That's the problem with a sort of hedonistic kind of left. But yeah, they went nutso about this article for some reason, because they had nothing else. And the guy on BuzzFeed who wrote that article loathed me and had a personal vendetta against me. So he was just looking for ways to poke holes as well. So the whole thing was, it didn't actually go very far, but it was blown very much out of proportion within a specific group of media people and their followers. And that was a really awful evening, because that was a Twitter pile that went for about 30 hours.
Oh,
it was literally, it was a big, big dog pile to the point where I nearly quit. And I was on the phone, and I'd only just started, and I'm pretty resilient when it comes to online abuse, and I didn't read any of it, but it's the fact that it's happening and that makes you kind of angry. It's very intimidating, because you think, well, do these people know where I live? Do they wish me physical harm? Right. I was really inexperienced. And I was talking to a friend of mine at midnight on the night it was happening, and I was crying, and I'm like, why are these people doing this? I said, I can't do this anymore. I want to delete my Twitter account. I never want to write anything again. And he said to me, Daisy, if you do that, that will be an existential victory for them. He said, you make up your own mind here, but I'm telling you now, if you do that, they will take that as a win. Yes. And so I thought, well, I will not quit. I thought, I can't let them win. But it was particularly bad after that. And I didn't respond at all during that pile-on, because someone had died, for goodness sake. And that was what made me so disgusted about these people. I'm thinking, someone has died here. And yes, you didn't like his cartoons, but you are disgusting for behaving like this when someone has literally died at the age of 61.
That must have been really difficult for you to not respond. That must have taken a lot of self-discipline.
Well, I think... sort of, but also not. I think if it had been in different circumstances, I would have maybe said a few things, but I didn't want to make it worse, because literally people were grieving. It was totally the context. I thought, I've got to stay out of this, because if I say anything, it would just be made much, much worse And it wasn't about me, it was about the guy who died. So because I have respect for people and respect for the dead, unlike these idiots, I'm like, you just get out of there. So I took about 5 days off Twitter. And eventually came back. But Clementine, because I didn't respond to any of her provocations, took that as sort of a guilt-free pass. And she was pushing and haranguing and like all of her followers were at it for like the next month. And I lost so much weight in that time period. I was so stressed. I was getting chest pains. I was fainting. Wow. Yeah, because of what this woman was doing. And again, I wasn't reading it, but it's the fact that it's happening that makes you really anxious for all the reasons I said before, until one evening, and she kept referencing this article, and I'm like, God, woman, have you ever attacked any of the actual arguments I've made? No, this is all like totally ad hominem, totally derogatory. She called me a boy suck, which is her name for women who don't agree with her. She was
what does that even mean?
Oh, it means I think it means someone that sucks up to men. But I think there's a bit of a sexual connotation there too, if you know what I mean.
Right.
She said the most misogynistic stuff she and her followers were saying, and I'm like, God, that's typical feminist, But anyway, long story short, one night,
jealousy of some sort.
Oh yeah. Well, they resented the fact that I was given a platform. Mm-hmm. That's why is she even allowed to speak? Why is she? And their goal, I know, was to get rid of me. They wanted to humiliate me into silence.
Right. But eventually, women are allowed to have voices so long as it's a voice that they agree with.
Yes, 100%. Until one night, I caught sight of something else she'd put. And again, all of this is totally unprovoked. You got to remember that. Something else she'd written like a month after I had written this article. Retweeted something I'd said, referenced the article and called it flaccid erotica and said it provoked universal cringing. And I just snapped. And when you have those moments in life where it is literally blind rage?
Yes.
That was my moment. And I had never in my life up until that moment in time felt blind rage. And I thought, you know what? You are a bitch, if you'll pardon the language. And I thought, okay, well, ignoring you obviously hasn't worked. Because online bullies take silence as a guilt-free pass to keep going. It's different from bullies in the real world. If you ignore them, they generally stop. But I thought, you know what? You have harangued me and Google stalked me and incited other people to try to humiliate me for 2 months now for no reason other than I disagree with you. Ignoring you hasn't worked. I'm going to have to hit back. And I knew that I thought I've got nothing to lose. Maybe all I wanted was for her to leave me alone. Mm-hmm. That was it. I'm just with you. Mind your own business and do your own thing. So I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to have to hit back on her level. She's not interested in reasoning, and she obviously only responds to smut. So I thought to myself, okay, I thought, what is the most controversial, outrageous, anti-feminist thing I can possibly do that is going to absolutely cut her right to the core? And then it came to me, Clementine is a largish woman.
Oh,
she's
dear.
not small. Oh, she's not massive, but she's got some extra tub on her body, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. And I knew for a fact that she'd had an eating disorder growing up.
Oh.
And I thought, I know what to do.
Oh, no.
And against all of my better judgment, and this is something I would never, ever, ever do to anyone ever, in a normal circumstance, I picked up my iPhone and I tapped the reply button and I typed in, "Darling, sit down. When was the last time you could wear horizontal stripes?" Accompanied, it was such a sting, accompanied by a photo of me from like a skinny angle wearing horizontal stripes. And I followed that up with, it was so mean. I would never normally do this. I couldn't believe what I was typing, but it's just, I was so angry. And then I followed it up immediately with, anyone with any class thinks you're an unimaginable pleb. It's time you realize that, you little troll. And the minute I put that out there, it was so mean. And there were like 5 or 6 really vicious hits in there. Very light compared to what she'd been saying about me. But it's so beneath me to do that kind of thing. And I felt kind of dirty, but I thought, she's not going to stop unless I actually show her that I'm not intimidated by her. And Twitter went nuts. And
oh my
that
God.
was,
Well, I mean, it's like the social media coliseum, Twitter. I mean, they love that.
oh, they love that. And Aussie Twitter is very small. And they were so, and it surprised me, they were so shocked and outraged and were acting like, and she was like posting photos of her breakfast going, see, look how much food I'm eating. And I don't even care, you know, because she was so offended. And I'm like, I'm thinking, hang on, you've literally harassed me and led an online misogyny campaign against me for 2 months. I hit back one time in a way that is exactly the level you've been hitting at me, and now you're claiming to be the victim? Like, are you high? I was so surprised by this reaction. And that time I did hit back during the pylon because I was trending on Twitter again. I'd already been trending. These people had me trending, and Aussie Twitter is very small, but it's still, it's intimidating. It's very intimidating to see your name there in the trending list. It's like, what are people saying? Then I hit back and blah, blah, and like, you know, sparred with people, and it all died down pretty quickly. And she never tweeted about me again.
Wow.
After that night. Yep. And so it proved that literally she's a coward, because all it took was for me to hit back once, and she's like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to talk about her anymore. And roundabout point, back to your point about the articles calling me those things with no justification, that was why. It was the day after that evening when all of her friends were like, how dare she fat shame Clementine? Oh my God, she's so awful. I'm going to write a whingy article about how awful she is. So that was why. Because I fat shamed, and I've apologized to Clementine actually since then. I apologized to her on live TV because I said, look, I was angry with you, but I'm sorry. That's not something I would normally say. You know, because it's not. It's rude and it's mean, and I did it to make her feel insecure. But it was, in the moment, it was justified, unfortunately, and it had the desired effect, which was simply to make her stop. But it made all of her feminist friends very angry, and they wrote some nasty things. So that's how, very long story, but how all of that, why they wrote those kinds of articles.
Okay. Well, and I noticed in your videos that there was, I think it was the Q&A, that you did one with Clementine Ford, and that was, I mean, it's one of your most popular videos. So, I mean, that obviously drew a crowd.
Oh, yeah, it did. That was a show called Hack Live, again on the ABC. And that was, the topic of that panel was, is male privilege bullshit? Which it is.
Yes, we know that.
We know that, but she doesn't know that, and neither do her feminist friends. But she and I were arguing. There were 8 of us all together, but she and I were in the middle because we were kind of the media personalities, and she's much, much bigger than me. But I was the second biggest on the panel. And I also knew they wanted us to fight because it's good TV.
Right.
That was where we had it out, because there was a segment on online misogyny, which I knew there would be. And Clementine got all of this attention because she gets some really horrific stuff that nobody deserves, like about her being raped with barbed wire. Like, nobody deserves that. Like, hideous stuff. And I feel very sorry for her that she gets that crap. But she's talking about, sometimes I hit back, but they do this. And I was like, I know I can get you on this topic because of the way you treat women who disagree with you. So I just sat there and I just let her talk and talk and talk. And eventually I was like, Clementine, you can't talk about online misogyny given the way that you behave when women who don't like you, who you don't like, talk. Because she never... And none of them do. They never argue on an intellectual level with these feminists, with women they disagree with. It is all undercutting. It's personal attacks. It's name calling. And feminists don't have...
Let's be real. I mean, women in general can kind of be catty bitches.
Well, yeah, that's just what women do. Men, when they argue with each other, they kind of punch each other, which isn't good. I never condone violence.
Literally, there is usually punching.
And it's over. Someone wins the fight and then they just never talk to each other again. But women, it's all verbal or like side eye, and it can go on for years. And now with the advent of the internet, it just facilitates that. And I'm glad I'm not in high school at the moment. You know, I don't know how they cope with social media there. But yeah, so we ended up in no. So we ended up, that was how that video came about. We ended up engaging on the topic. We had a very polite discussion about it. It was very snaky, but we didn't yell at each other. And that was when I apologized to her. I said, I'd like to apologize for that. I shouldn't have done it. I was angry with you. So yeah, that was when, and I haven't seen her or spoken to her in person since that night. Although we've occasionally, I think I called her out on Twitter a few times on just things, but generally I just avoid her. You know,
probably a good plan.
Lies.
Of it.
oh yeah. I've never had an enemy, and I don't like to think of her as an enemy. But I think if I had to say I had one, it would probably be that woman.
Maybe like an arch nemesis or something.
Nemesis is a better word. Antithesis. She's the antithesis of me.
So I want to take a moment real quick and go through. We got some super chats coming in. I know there's a way to like just go through and see them all listed, but I don't know how to do that. We all know that I don't do technology. So let's just scroll through here real quick. They are conveniently highlighted. Samuel Hill, thank you for your generosity. LCC says, love your sense of humor. Let's see. Ooh, somebody in the chat was being bad. It looks like. Ooh, someone got put in time. Oh, a lot of. There's some time out in here. Thank you to my wonderful moderators for making sure that I don't get banned off of the YouTube for my live chats. The Human Shrug says, just cuz. Thank you. That's a good enough reason. Let's see here. That a stick 13, however you say that, says, just saying thanks for being such a needed voices. Keep on trucking, ladies. Thank you very much. That's very sweet.
Very sweet. Thank you.
Mandatory Carrie says, both troublemakers are watching now. Share, right? Andy Robichaud says, live free or die. Thanks for doing these live streams, Liberty Doll. Thank you guys for tuning in and, convincing me to do them, really, because, you guys told me to do it, and I was like, okay. Fit and Fire says, great chat. Unfortunately, Mr. Mom Duty's call to make dinner. I hope it's something good. Can't wait for the wife's deployment to end. Make sure y'all hit the thumbs up. Oh, yes, thumbs up. That is a thing that is helpful and is good. And for some reason, he's the one that always reminds me. Everyone give a thumbs up. That helps the video and it helps the channel. Christoph Harper says, glorious. I have noticed that the one thing feminist and urban progressive leftists cannot stand is classical liberal and libertarian or moral stance women. That is true. I have a lot of people that see my videos and for some reason call me a trad thought. I don't really know where they're getting that from, but it's a common complaint. Mandatory Carrie says, ladies, this was someone else's idea. I'm hoping she claimed their share of the credit. Stripes, ouch. Yes, Mandatory Carrie, again, was the one that helped facilitate this and get it set up. And British Pete says, as always, I'm saying hi, Liberty, and amazing you are doing a live stream with Daisy. Oh my goodness, David Schmidt. You two are great. Love the show's best duo. Aw, thank you. Thank you for being so generous. Okay. All right. I think we're all caught up. I do apologize that last time I missed a couple because the chat was moving too fast. Let's see. So has any of these accusations affected your ability to get work or anything like that? I mean, I know that you said that the political climate, for the most part, is a lot more less polarized there. So, I mean, does it affect you in any way?
Well, not directly. And the thing is, if you get sort of a bit notorious on Twitter, it can kind of help you in a funny sort of way because it makes people pay attention. They're like, oh, well, this, and from those pylons, yeah, they were hard and they weren't fun, but God, I got a hell of a lot of followers out of them because people are like, who is this girl? So it was great publicity, but not directly, no. And I was really, really lucky with Sky because it's sort of the perfect fit, and the people there are so lovely. And there's a broader scope of views than people make out actually on Sky. So there's room for great discussion without scratching at each other. You know what I mean? It's a great medium. So I was lucky that I got in with Sky very, very early on, sort of did my time there and eventually got the regular spot. But my suspicion is that if I were, and this applies to Sydney Watson as well, she's another Australian-American YouTuber, if she and I were left-wing, I reckon we would be all over the mainstream channels. We would, because they're so desperate to get girls on TV, or, you know, everywhere they're desperate to get girls on TV. We would be all over the ABC and all over Channel 10 and Channel 7 doing all of their panel shows if we had different politics. That is my theory, because like I said, they want the women. You got two women who are, you know, politically aware, you know, well, I like to think I'm reasonably articulate. You know, we both do our research going with camera experience, and she's been on Sky News as well. But for some reason, they totally ignore us. So I think I think my politics, not necessarily the articles about being alt-right, or because I'm not alt-right, certainly not pseudo-alt-right, none of that. I don't think they've had any kind of general effect, because they were really written to kind of preach to the converted. But I do think that if I had different politics, I would be much more mainstream than I am.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say that, I mean, it's great that it didn't affect you as badly as it could. And I mean, they say that, you know, all publicity is good publicity. I mean, to me, it's kind of amazing. And I'm a little bit envious, I have to admit, that you came out so unscathed. Of course, it's a very different environment, but, you know, the situation that I'm in, I have to turn down like public appearances all the time. Massachusetts is very anti-gun, and I have been asked to show up or speak at probably like a dozen Second Amendment rallies, the free speech rally, and all of these things. And whether they are a cause I would support or not, I have to kind of just like blanket turn down everything, because, you know, there's such a worry of it affecting my business or getting doxxed or whatever. And I'm trying to move away from my actual business a little bit anyways, but it's such a climate that it's almost like you have to live this double life and keep everything under wraps so that you don't have the wrath of, I don't know, the left community coming after you.
Yeah. I can imagine that's really hard for you, since you're running a business, particularly as a therapist. You'd want to, I'm sure, like you'd want to remain quite impartial so that people feel they can come to you. So that must be very tricky for you, kind of trying to balance your business, but also be able to freely express yourself. So yeah, that's a real shame. You have to turn those things down.
It's sort of a little bit of a running joke that my office space that I rent out, so I do these live streams at the end of my workday. The door into the building is locked. The lights are shut off. My white noise machine is still outside the door. I have the in session sign on the door so that if anyone happens to hear anything, they can, I don't know, interpret it, whatever. And my regular door is locked. I have a fortress that I have on lockdown up here.
Yeah. Sounds like you needed it. And I didn't know it was that bad in Massachusetts. I mean, I knew it was really blue, but I didn't know that it was like California or Portland rabid in Massachusetts. It's such a shame.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. There was even I mean, so the free speech rally, free speech is not an alt-right idea, but when they had that in August of, I think it was 2017, they had asked me to speak and I turned it down. But there was even a situation where one of the organizers, people found out ahead of time that he was helping out with it, and they doxed him and got him fired from his job. And it was this whole big thing. And that all happened here in Massachusetts.
Oh, it's so appalling. Like these people who are so anti-hearing and opposing view are just intellectually bereft. That's the only way. And bad people as well. If you do that to someone, you are a bad person. And this is what I find about the regressive left. Generally, they're the ones who are screaming tolerance, you know, inclusivity, and people who are so vehemently pro, you know, anti-racist and pro-tolerance and, oh, look at me, I'm a wonderful person, are generally projecting what's the opposite of what they are inside. So I find people who join these militant causes under the guise of acting for the common good are actually bad people looking to exercise their bad behavior, but disguising it as the fact that they're actually good people. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and you see that, you see that with jihadists, saw that with the Nazis. Not that I'm comparing these people to the Nazis and jihadists, you saw that with the Soviets. You know, we're acting for the common good. This is the good of society, and we're going to kill all these people while we do it because this is for the common good. And it's the same with people who make trouble and who dox and who violently protest events. They are just exercising their internal badness and excusing it as working for a common good cause.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So one of the things that I wanted to ask that we didn't skip by, I don't know, but just sort of like ended up being talked around a little bit, I suppose, is, so have you always been more on the conservative, or I mean, I guess in Australia, classical liberal sense? Like, has that always been your views? Has that evolved over time?
I have always been, I've always lent to the right. Even when I was in high school, before I knew what politics was or what left and right was, like, people used to love doing group projects, for instance, and I hated them. I'd always want to work individually because I had sort of individual ideas, and, you know, I never wanted to.
Something in common.
Yeah. You know, I hated, you know, dressing the same as everyone else, and I always used to, you know, get annoyed if people were like, "Oh, miss, I was too busy last night to do my homework," and then she'd be like, "Oh, that's fine, you can give an extension." I'm like, "Hey, I had 3 hours of dance training last night, and I got my stuff done. Why is she getting a handout?" Like, you can see that attitude already was sort of developing. And I used to be much more moderate than I am now, because, you know, that happens as you get older. Generally, the pattern is you get more conservative, and certainly hanging around in these media and YouTube circles, I've learned a lot about leftism and about conservatism, and it can push you one way or the other. And I got pushed a bit further to the right. There was a period of time in the middle when I had a few views that were a bit feministy, and I used to call myself a feminist, but that was before. I did
see that on an online magazine. I think it was called She Said.
She Said.
And I was like, wait, is this the same person?
Did you see the bio that Daisy is a passionate feminist bio?
Yes, I did. And I saw like the sex columns and
my sex columns. I loved writing my sex columns. No, well, First things first, I didn't write that bio, and my editor wrote that bio because she knew I called myself a feminist, and she wanted us to look like we had a political writer or something like that. And I remember, like, she and I didn't get on, and I remember actually she asked us to sort of write a bio for ourselves for the main page, and I gave her one, and she didn't use it. She just wrote her own bio for me. Terrible. I know, and I'm like, and I was so like not confident at the time. I was quite a different person, so I didn't say anything, and she was very intimidating, like passive aggressive. So I'm like, oh, I'll leave it, it'll be fine, like, you know, that was my attitude to it. But yeah, I had some views that were quite not like, I lived in that, I was pushed into that victim bubble a little bit while working at this magazine, because researching for the articles I was writing, you come across a lot of lefty feminist authors, and you get pushed into that thing. But that was before I realized that feminism had gone down the toilet. And I found that, to me, feminism just meant equality and freedom and focus on women's issues, which is really what feminism is, you know.
I mean, it's the dictionary definition, but it's not the definition in practice.
No, exactly. And that was my problem. I was going by the dictionary definition of feminism, but I noticed I was defending the ideology from people criticizing it more than I was actually espousing what the writers I'd found were saying. And I thought to myself, hang on a minute. You haven't agreed with any of this stuff for quite some time now, and they've also started making up words like manspreading. Like, that was the real tipping point for me when manspreading came in. I thought, really? You don't know why men sit with their legs apart on the train? A little uncomfortable for them to have their legs any closer together. It's not, you know, I remember the theory of manspreading came out, and the thing was, it's just men taking up male space to take up space in the environment because that's patriarchy. And I was like, okay, you sort of lost me. And then I started listening to Milo Yiannopoulos. I discovered Milo, and he had convinced me within 6 hours of watching him that the pay gap didn't exist, and neither did rape culture. And I thought to myself, you know what? You've been lied to by these feminists who say they're for equality. They're not actually for equality. They've lied to you about the pay gap. They've lied to you about rape culture. They've lied to you about men being inherently against you. And they've also, I noticed, made me feel constantly resentful and hateful and worried, because I thought no matter how hard I worked, I used to not know what the pay gap was. I thought it was like for like. I thought, well, I'll never make as much money as men because I'm a woman. That's so unfair. And the minute I realized that was not true, it was like the shackles had been taken off.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, I feel so empowered and so liberated. And that was really what pushed me away from feminism. And I stopped using the label because I thought these women do not represent what I think. The way they talk about men does not represent my relationship with the men in my life. Those men are wonderful. I don't know what shitty men these women have associated with, but perhaps they should make better friends.
Yeah,
Probably. Probably. But and that pushed me further to the right as well when I discovered Ben Shapiro and I discovered Milo and Jordan Jordan Peterson isn't a conservative, but he talks about the shared concerns of the right quite a bit. So yeah, I used to be much more moderate. And just with age and with acquiring knowledge and hanging out with different people, it's moved me further and further to the right, to what my views are. Like, I'm not an extremist at all. I have very stock standard center right views.
Okay.
You know, I'm socially liberal on a number of things, but I'm also quite socially conservative when it comes to abortion and to immigration. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I have progressed further to the right, but I'm probably in a comfortable spot. I doubt I'll go any further than I am.
I think I find that a lot of people, or at least a lot of young women in our generation, myself included, were maybe like feminists or called themselves feminists at one point, because that's sort of just what you did. I mean, especially again, here in Massachusetts, I was one class away from a women's study degree. Well, women's study minor in college. Wow. And I know, it's terrible. And I still remember my defining moment was I did the worst crime of all. I changed for a man, quote unquote, but in reality, it was I met my husband and he pretty much said, well, have you heard of Ron Paul? And then he said, well, libertarianism believes everyone is equal. So if everyone's already equal, like, why do you need feminism? Mm-hmm. And it was like brain imploding. And I was like, by golly, he's right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I know exactly the feeling. And that's the thing. It's like, we have equality. Why do you need feminism anymore? It's like, you know what? Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Oh my God, that's very interesting. I love the thought of you doing women's studies. Oh, I love the
I had I was also the not dressing like other people and everything. I had a mohawk before the social justice people kind of appropriated that culture.
Oh,
with
yes,
all the different colors, and I had the jacket with all the patches and the studs and the spike on it, and I had a red patch right here that said, "This is what a feminist looks like." Oh my God. I'm so horrified now.
Well, no, I know what you mean by how you call yourself a feminist because it's just the done thing. Like, I grew up in Sydney, which is a very left-wing city. And yeah, we all just called ourselves feminists. It was just sort of what you did. And there was sort of, well, I'm a millennial female and I call myself a feminist. That's just sort of what we do. And this is why I worry about young women, is that they're not given any kind of opposing opinion in the mainstream. There are no women their age who are talking about not being a feminist and justifying that reasonably, which is what you do and what I do and what so many female commentators on YouTube do. But they don't get that. And if they don't know where to look for it, then they get stuck in that. They get overwhelmed by how much feminist commentary there is in the media, and they get stuck in this bubble and they feel bad about themselves and they feel terribly disempowered under the guise of feeling empowered, and they get lied to. Mm-hmm. They just get lied to constantly. And I find that horrifying, that women who claim that they are pro-woman and trying to empower women will just tell outright lies about things like the pay gap. It's so wicked, so wicked.
And hell hath no fury, like a feminist scorned, as you
Oh,
learned
yeah.
of Clementine Ford. And it's like, you know, okay, women are allowed to have their own views unless it's an anti-feminist view, in which case it's, oh, internalized misogyny. It's your dad told you to think that, your brother told you to think that, your pimp told you to think that, which is just so horrifying and degrading when these people supposedly want to lift women up and empower them, and they're doing the exact opposite on a pretty regular basis.
Oh, yeah. Well, their hypocrisy is just absolutely mind-blowing. And they're so tolerant of bad behavior on their own side as well. And, you know, on the subject of, you know, you're a conservative woman, oh, well, a man must have told you that. Like, I get that too. They're like, you're being influenced by all the white middle-aged men that you work with who are conservative, and they're using you, and you're just capitulating to them for money. And I'm like, you think I earn tons of money doing this? Like, when I left that women's magazine, I took a 100% pay cut for a while with all of the stuff that I was doing. You know, and I get that a lot, or it's like, oh, it's because you hate yourself, or you want boys to like you. And it's like, no, I just disagree with you. That's it. I disagree with you. And you've got even people like Hillary Clinton, remember pushing that interview she did in India, where she said the reason that white women didn't vote for her was because their husbands told them to, or their boss told them to, and they felt I'm like, this is Hillary Clinton. Lena Dunham went on The View straight after the election and talked about the white women who voted for Trump, and said they obviously haven't been raised with the rhetoric of self-empowerment and feel pressured by men in their life to do that, and they've done what's not best for them, and they don't know what to do to keep themselves safe.
Right.
What on earth does that mean? to keep themselves safe. What are you talking about, woman? Like, seriously, it's so hypocritical, and it's because they simply are not equipped with the knowledge to deal with women who disagree with them, because they have this pack mentality idea, and it's why they hate conservative and libertarian women more than they hate a lot of men. They can't justify our existence. They can justify men who disagree with them by calling them misogynists. They can't do that with us, and they hate it. They absolutely hate it.
There was actually, so if you are a fan of Shapiro, I don't know how often you listen to his show, but I was listening to him the other day, and he was talking about some poll that was done where they polled a bunch of Democrats and said, well, you know, what about a potential candidate would be most important to you? And there was a whole slew of people that said, oh, well, you know, someone's automatically going to get my vote if they're a woman. And that was one of the things that was most important to them, was their gender.
Oh my God, that is so regressive. Like,
it really is.
And that's why you know, we call them the regressive left, because they claim to be progressive, but they have a lot of views that are just really, really regressive. You know, and that women should sort of work as a block. And I'm going to vote for her. She's not necessarily, you know, I don't necessarily agree with everything, and I don't think she's that smart, but she's a woman, and I'm going to vote for her because women need all the help that they can get. And it's so patronizing. It's this bigotry of low expectations. I can't believe that. Is really interesting. Wow, I didn't know they were that far along with it.
Right. It is interesting, especially considering, I mean, right now, well, I haven't checked in a couple days after the second day of debates, but Joe Biden, signature old white dude Joe Biden, was leading in the polls for quite some time. I don't know where that is now after the debates. I know that I've seen a lot of headlines saying that his you know, PR people are scrambling to try to set out some fires and make him not look so bad. But I haven't gotten to watch the second day of the debates yet. I spent literally 7 hours today going through and dissecting the first day.
My God, there was so much material. Oh my God, yeah. Oh, look, I think maybe the reason Biden was leading in the polls is because he's familiar.
Yeah,
you know, he's sort of remnants of Obama. They see in Biden because he was the VP, and he's familiar and comfortable. And certainly the moderates in the Democrats, the disillusioned Democrats, would prefer him to someone like Kamala Harris, who I
Right.
hate so much.
Oh.
But yeah, I think he got grilled by a few people. He got grilled by Kamala, actually, in the debate on the issue of him being, you know, I don't know if he was pro-segregation, but something to do with segregation and something to do with race. And like, poor bugger, like, how do you defend against that if you're a leftist man? You've got a woman who is younger than you and who is not white talking about racism. What do you do if you are Joe Biden? How do you defend yourself without looking like an idiot or being called a racist or a misogynist? So yeah, there are a few moments in that second one I thought, oh, Joe, you're in a bit of trouble. The debates were interesting. I watched most of both of them. And the only person I thought really stood out as not hysterical was Tulsi Gabbard. She is very cool. I like her a lot because she's in no way extremist. She's very moderate. You know, she's sort of like a moderate Republican, but aside from the fact she's not pro-life. You know, I love the fact she's ex-military. I think that's so cool. I love the fact that she's anti-interventionist and anti-war. I think that's terrific. And she really made that point so well. Like, she brought that home so well in that first debate. And I think that if she ends up getting the nomination, the Republicans should be really worried, because all the moderates, all the disillusioned Democrats who voted, the one like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, who voted for Obama twice and then suddenly voted Trump, I would run back to Tulsi. Because she's like, because Trump, you know, he gets painted as an extremist, and he's not at all. He's really very moderate. Like he you know, he's got different views on a lot of things, and so does Tulsi. But she doesn't come with the controversy that Trump comes with. Right. You know, so if you're a moderate person who's gone, look, I can't stand Hillary Clinton. She's not going to look after my interests. Look, here's this Trump. He's uncouth and he's rude, and he says these things, but you know, I'll vote for him. You got Tulsi, who's very measured and very calm and very polite, but very assertive and so charismatic, who's saying all of these things that your everyday person is kind of chill with. The Republicans have a lot to worry about if she gets a nomination.
I really found, you know, before I had never really seen her speak, and I know that she's really popular with a lot of the libertarians because of her anti-interventionist, anti-war stances, but I just couldn't reconcile that with her platform of Medicare for all and being so anti-gun. I was like, man, you know, these libertarians are, you know, promoting her Tulsi 2020 despite this. And then when I saw the debates, I was like, oh, that's what it is. I mean, I still don't agree with her. I mean, I suppose they're all promoting gun bans and Medicare for all at this point, so she probably would be the best out of the bunch. I don't think they're going to let her get that far because she's anti-war. You know, their pro-woman only goes so far, so it's so long as you are pro-woman establishment. But I could really see the charisma and why there are so many people that like her. She was magnetic, I guess, would be the best word I could think of.
And she just seems like she'd be a nice person. And people, you know, you can talk about politics all you want, but at the end of the day, your average person who is busy paying the bills and looking after the kids and doesn't have a lot of time to pay much attention to political ins and outs because they're busy living life and dealing with important things, they just want a nice person, you know, who they think is good and is going to work in their best interest and not be sort of swayed and not say terrible things about people. You know, and Tulsi just seems like a nice person, but she won't get the nomination because, as you said, she's anti-establishment, and also she's not sort of anti-Trump enough. And I remember after the Russian collusion thing came in as a furphy, as a non-issue, she said, okay, guys, we've lost on this. There's not a thing. We need to put this past, move forward and support the country and the president in going forward, which is a very reasonable view. And she got ruthlessly attacked for it from the left of the Democrats, who was super duper anti-Trump, for not being anti-Trump enough. And certainly I noticed that with all of the Democrats, bar a few, like Tulsi was one of them, their big concern is we're going to beat Donald Trump. Yep. We're going to beat Trump. We got to beat Donald Trump. How is that looking to the future or giving people hope or showing them that they're going to, you know, have your best interest? Like, I remember I saw the polling about the Russian collusion thing, and like 1% of the population or something cares about it.
Right.
Like no one cares, stop talking about that, talk about happy things and enlightened, present a lovely plan for the future. It's not, we're going to beat Donald Trump. How is that going to work?
I personally loved the part where they went by and down the line and showed that nobody on this panel could follow directions and ask for the one-word answer of the biggest geopolitical threat. And de Blasio at the end was Russia. And then they used that to go into a segue to ask, well, gee, like if you guys can't impeach Trump, are you going to do legal action against him once you're president? Like, really, we are talking, another year and a half in advance. And we're talking about like, oh, well, so will you do legal action then? They just cannot let it go.
They are such sore losers, don't you find? They still have not got over the fact that they lost the election in 2016. They have still not blamed themselves. They've blamed everything but themselves. Hillary Clinton has blamed everything but herself. Mm-hmm. And it's not just the Democrats, though. It's the left generally. It's the same in Australia. Whenever Labor loses an election, which has been quite a lot lately, they haven't been in power for at least a decade, I think, maybe a little bit, years and years and years. This is a third term that the Liberal Party's won in a row. Mm-hmm. They are so salty. And they sit on it, and they blame the media. And I'm like, the media is well on your side here. You have nothing to complain about with the media. They blame the media, or they blame racist Queenslanders. And like my state, like I said, they flipped to the Liberal Party bigly. They were joking about a secession of Queensland. And there were these memes going around of a map of Australia without Queensland, or Queensland like floating off because we voted the way they didn't like. It's racist Queenslanders. There's people who are obsessed with coal. It's like, no, it's you guys. And get over it. It's not the end of the world. Conservatives, have you noticed, and libertarians, when our candidates lose, we don't get so salty. We're like, oh, well, we might get a bit sad for a day, but then we kind of move on. The left just doesn't.
Right.
That's unhealthy.
Though, I mean, I remember when Obama won second term, there was this sort of movement going around online to break California down into separate states, because there is very much a rural, more like red part, and then the blue cities. And oh my goodness, a lot of the Democrats were like, oh my God, these people are so salty, and it's terrible that they would suggest that, they would divide the country like that. And then when Trump won, they turned around and did the same thing.
And tenfold over. That's the thing. Like, the reaction was so extreme. And I think a lot of it is just embarrassment. And even in Australia, like I said, we get such a cultural flow on from the US. Like, the behavior of a lot of Australians after Trump won was just disgusting. And they were putting things on Facebook like hashtag not my president. I'm like, of course he's not your president. You don't live there, you moron. You live in Australia. What are you doing? Are you really that invested? Like, it was just disgusting because they were so embarrassed that they got it so wrong.
Well, I mean, it is embarrassing because think of it. They're talking about how awful that Trump is and how terrible it is. And they don't understand because they had the media on their side and all this. And it must have been fake news, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, when you think about it, like, okay, so say that Trump is this terrible, awful candidate. That means that the Democrats put someone forward that was so bad that even Trump beat them. That just shows how awful Hillary Clinton is, that their own party won't even,
Yeah, and she is awful. And don't get me wrong, I felt very sorry for her when she lost. Like, when she gave that concession speech, I was like, my God, woman, you must be the most disappointed person in the world right now. Like, I hate watching people lose. Like, even when the Liberals in Australia won our election a couple of months ago, when Bill Shorten, who's the leader of the Labor Party, gave his concession speech, and he had his wife like looking on earnestly, willing him to keep talking, and you could tell he'd been crying. I was like, oh my God. And because he thought he was going to win. He was like a Hillary Clinton. We call him Billary. That's his nickname. I was so sure he was going to get it. And then I thought, you must feel like you've been hit by a bus. I hate watching people lose, even if I don't like them. But Hillary just had this entitled thing about her that she believed she was just born to rule. Nobody likes anyone who thinks they're born to rule. And you got people like Obama saying, oh, she's the most qualified candidate to ever run for president. And people are like, well, la-di-da. Like, you're telling me that the people I like who aren't Hillary aren't qualified? What are you calling me, an ignoramus or something like that?
Well, and qualified how? She was the Secretary of State, and her husband was the president, and like got a blowjob in the Oval Office. I mean, how does that make Hillary Clinton qualified?
Exactly. And I think there's still a lot of speculation as to why she kind of stuck by him after that. And look, that's nobody's business other than hers. And look, if she wanted to stand by her man, fine. But you can't tell me, and maybe I'm wrong here, that she wasn't aware of how beneficial it is for her to be married to Bill Clinton.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if you are familiar with House of Cards at all, but I picture the main couple in House of Cards as very much the Clintons. It's like a power, like, business relationship and not much else, I think.
Yeah, it's like a dynasty. She didn't want to give up the political dynasty because I'm sure, well, she's always wanted to be president.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. She's always wanted to be not just president, but the first female president of the United States, and that would be historic. But you know what? I've noticed too. What I've noticed about the women candidates in this race and the Democrats generally, and people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they totally. Oh, I know. They totally a visceral reaction. They've totally dropped the gender act. They've stopped talking about, I'm a woman and women, like, because that was all Hillary campaigned on. Her whole thing was, I'm a woman, he's a misogynist, so vote for me or you're a misogynist.
Right.
That was her whole thing. The women have, I mean, what's her name? Gillibrand woman with the blonde hair in the second debate did a bit of that.
The one that changes her positions like all of the time.
Yeah, that one, yeah. Who still calls herself a young mother, apparently, at the age of 52, which I find a little bit interesting. I saw someone mention that last night. I'm like, okay, well, good for her. But they've stopped campaigning on that because they realize it doesn't work. Like, people don't like it because people don't care. They don't care. They just want someone up there who's going to do the job, man, woman, or pot plant. Just give them a politician who's not an asshole, who's not an idiot, and who looks vaguely honest and who has some good ideas. It does not matter who or what that is. But yeah, they've kind of stopped doing it, which is I never thought they'd stop doing it, but they have.
I was really surprised because in the first debate, they were talking about, I think it was the abortion issue that came up. I mean, I don't know. It was mentioned like half a dozen times practically. But the only time anyone ever said anything, it was, what is her name? Klobuchar? And she was like, oh, well, I don't know if you noticed, but there's 3 of us women up here that have done amazing things for women's rights. And that was the only time it was mentioned. I was a little shocked.
They've just realized, they're like, right, well, that strategy didn't work. I mean, if you look at, say, Red Cortez, I like to call her Red Cortez because she's a filthy commie, God love her. But Red Cortez, I thought when she came into power, she'd be, I'm the young Hispanic woman, but there's hardly any mention of her race or gender. She petitioned as the young radical, which, let's be honest, whatever you think of radical leftism, I don't like it at all, and I'm sure you don't either. But it's a much better thing to campaign on than your gender or your race, because you're being very straightforward about where you sit politically. And she's the young, radical, democratic socialist. And I thought, well, look, good for you for being upfront instead of faffing around your actual policies like Hillary Clinton did, because you know that people generally aren't going to like them because it's all pro-war, by saying, I'm a woman, so she's been very straightforward with that, and it's a much more effective campaign platform to campaign on, definitely, than something like gender.
Yeah, and it's interesting the way that words change meaning depending what side is saying them and who is talking about it. Because, I mean, okay, if you're AOC, then being a radical is great. You're a new, fresh face. But if you are anywhere right of, I don't know, Stalin or something, or Marx, then being a radical is bad, and you need to be stamped out and deplatformed, and it's ridiculous hypocrisy.
It's interesting, isn't it? How she sort of tried. I don't know whether she's done it consciously or she just thinks that there are so many democratic socialists out there, which, let's face it, she probably does, that she thinks she can get away with it. But she somehow at least attempted to reclaim the word radical and dress it up as something sort of good and reactionary. But what I hate about her, well, one of the many things I hate about her, is that she continues to use words like organize and mobilize. And I hate those words used politically because it has these not so vague undertones of violence.
Yeah.
It's very kind of style of, organizing the troops. It's very Bolshevik, if you know what I mean. And I think if I'm picking up on that, and I'm sure you've picked up on that as well, other people will be picking up on that outside of the radical left. And they go, oh, I don't really like the sound of that. And I actually made a video a little while ago about Red. She's not very popular. She's the darling of the media and the darling of social media. It's somewhere in my videos, but she's polls really low with not just Republicans, but Democrats as well. Like, and considering the amount of, like, it's a 40-something approval rate she has amongst Democrats, which isn't bad, but considering the amount of positive media attention she gets and how prolific she is on social media and how apparently adored she is, you'd expect it to be much higher than that. And not only that, more Democrats aren't even aware of what she's about than Republicans are. Like, more Republicans know who she is and know what her policies are than Democrats.
Wow.
So it's really interesting. So what I think must have happened is because most people are sort of varying shades of centrist, the kind of the disillusioned Democrats or the moderate Democrats, they look at her and go, oh, well, she's a social justice warrior. I don't want anything to do with her. Let's focus on people like Tulsi. So they're not interested.
Right.
They're not interested because they're not socialists. They don't want to be taxed through the nose. They probably want some better health care. But you know what I mean? Like, people aren't, as a general rule, they aren't interested in radicalism in terms, especially, and they don't think it's positive. So you're absolutely right.
I mean, and I know that she doesn't poll well among her own party. And, people outside of, the tiny little, millennial hipster subset aren't really big fans of her. And still, even though I know that, I'm surprised every time I hear it and get kind of taken aback for a minute, because you wouldn't think that from her Twitter feed or her Instagram feed or her little videos where she's like, oh, how do I cook using my Instapot, or whatever it is.
Oh my God. And she puts her foot in her mouth all the time, like that bit when she compared Trump's border wall to the Berlin Wall. It was like, do you have any knowledge of history? The Berlin Wall was designed to trap people. And it was a socialist thing, which you apparently like, whereas the border wall is a secure. I mean, like, obviously, everyone knows why the Trump wall is not anything like the Berlin Wall.
Or the congressional raise that's not actually a raise.
Yeah. Or the three chambers of Congress. That was another one. And look, like, I mean, I do live television, and I do live streams. You do live streams. Like, we both know how easy it is to slip up on a word and to flub a word. And certainly in the context of television. But the problem, like the standard I set for myself when I'm on TV is extremely high, because with live TV, you get one shot.
Yes.
If you get one thing wrong in the moment and you don't correct yourself, that's it. You have no chance to re-edit. And live is better than pre-records because it means no one can kind of edit you around to make you look stupid or bad or whatever. But you get one shot. And so I am, when I go on television, so for every single thing, even if it's like 5 minutes, so compulsively over-prepared, because you cannot afford to make a mistake. And I am under this much pressure compared to Red, who's under this much pressure when she's on TV. How is she getting up there and making boo-boos on live television? And I feel sorry for her because she's inexperienced. But I'm sorry. Everyone's like, well, she's young. She's not that young.
Well, but I mean, I don't really, I don't think she has that much of an excuse, right? Because there was someone who, I had gotten into with on social media at one point, and their whole defense was, well, I know how all of these things work because I'm an aide in DC. And they said that basically, these lawmakers, these Congress people don't know like two shits about anything that they're legislating or what the law says or any of that. It's aides that do a lot of that work, just kind of like paralegals do. And then, they write up the summary and they give it to the congressperson, and the congressperson is the one that's reading it and studying it and, reading the bullet points of their research. So, I mean, and I've talked to other people and they have said that, yes, that is how it operates. So that makes it even worse, because that means that there is, either her aide sucks and is not doing their job, or someone is giving her these talking points and giving her this material to study, and she's just like not doing it.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like I can't imagine getting up there and or her Twitter account, like tweeting it. Remember the thing about the military spending versus, I think it was the healthcare. Like there was a billion number of dollars unaccounted for in Pentagon spending or something. She's like, you could spend that, and it's like, well, that doesn't mean the money's there, Alex. it just means it's an accounting error. And remember, she did the interview on CNN with Anderson Cooper, and he said, the Washington Post gave you 4 Pinocchios for that. What do you mean? And she's like, people get so concerned with being exactly, semantically, factually correct that they forget about what is being morally right. And I was like, went way down in my estimation after that. I was like, wow, you are like every social justice warrior ever who is not concerned with truth or facts. You are concerned with what you think is moral. And how do you define morality? What I think is different. What I think is moral is different probably to what you think is moral, which is different to what someone else thinks is. Morality is, except for a few things like, murder and torture and rape. Which
those things are usually generally wrong.
Wrong and immoral. Like morality is very relative to people's life experience, and everyone's own world. So for her to say that, I'm like, you are one of those up yourself leftists who thinks that they're so correct that everyone else is just scum. And it was so revealing, that interview.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, she had talked all about, these rich people and these corporations and all these people that are corrupt. And then there was the whole thing about that maybe her campaign was like money laundering to her fiance, and, her apartment was not really her apartment, and none of her neighbors had ever actually seen her or knew who she was. And it's like, well, that's kind of shady.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. And then there was the thing about her living in a luxury apartment.
Yes.
And asking, asking for that, that raise or that cost of living adjustment. And well, I'm not, that cost of living adjustment. I don't know all of people's expenses in Congress. I'm sure they have to pay a lot of money, but it was Breitbart who outlined this best. Okay, they're on the freshmen are on 174 grand a year. Yes. Your average American, who even professionals who have university degrees who make like 88 grand a year, are still earning less than half of what she would earn. How is she not? And yeah, of course, there's pressure to maintain 2 households, one in Washington and one in their home state. But people on your average one-person salary manage to maintain 1 household. If you're on more than double of your average person's salary, how are you not able to maintain 2 households?
Right.
And she doesn't have any childcare expenses. She has a partner who works, so there would be raking in an awful lot of money between them. Mm-hmm. And she's citing that, I remember, as a reason why people should get a raise. And not only that, she lives in a luxury apartment building, the rents of which are quite well above your average rent in DC, and trying to downplay it by, it has like a concierge and a spa and a sauna and a rooftop garden, like it's a luxury apartment, trying to downplay it by comparing it to a housing complex in Queens. And then there was something she posted, look, I live in my apartment, which is called a luxury apartment complex. I have clean water, I have clean air, I have food, I have space. And see, in America, where with these luxury things, we're told basic needs are a luxury when they're not. They're actually a human right. And I'm like, you have a spa. you have in your building. Is that a rust? So she tries to downplay it, and at the same time, her whole campaign, like, she makes me very angry. Her whole campaign, a lot of it was anti-luxury apartments because they drive up the rent in the area and they drive poor people out of the area. And she was very much against them. Now she's living in one and complaining she doesn't have enough money.
Right.
What is that?
Well, and her whole thing about how everyone should be taking public transportation, and she pretty much never took public transportation at all during her campaign, even though like the subway was like, I don't know, like a block away or something like that. And then your impression is like spot on, by the way. And the newest thing, again, we don't know her finances and her expenses, but talking about how she still can't pay off her student loans. Girl, you are making, I don't even know, way more than me, way more than anyone I know, and we're all paying off our student loans. Why can't she? And if, her whole thing of, well, it's easier to get into Congress than it is to pay off your student loans. Well, maybe if you weren't working as like a bartender or a waitress, and they can make decent money, but she always talks about her fancy degree from BU. Girl, why weren't you using it?
Yeah, exactly. She's an example of do as I say, not as I do.
Yes.
Which
Absolutely.
is a very kind of elite ruling class thing. Look, ultimately I do know what's best, but I'm just going to make it a little bit easier for myself because I'm working so hard to make everything right. Like that's what she is. And like, I'm sure she's been swamped with people trying to influence her since she got into office. And I do think she campaigned with the best interest of her community at heart. Like I do. I don't think she's a bad person, but I think she is one of those social justice warriors who is just certain that she's correct. And if you get the wrong people around those people, then they become absolutely mad with power.
Yes.
Basically that's the thing, and that's the potential there with her. And one day she will run for president. And that will be a worry.
Yeah, hopefully hopefully that's not in my lifetime, but realistically it will be.
Probably. Sadly. Yeah. Oh my God.
Well, so on that note, I see that it's just about 8:30, and I said I was going to keep you for only like an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. And
we've had a lovely chat.
Yeah. So the other sort of running joke is I am super cool and play Dungeons and Dragons on Friday nights after my live stream. And
so
technically D&D session starts at 8, and I always tell them I'm going to be late, but I always end up being really late because I don't work overtime. So I'm just going to run through the last few super chats real quick, and then we will do our little outro here. Let's see. Josh Hutchins says almost went full metal feminist. Yes, he knew me a bit back then. Oh. Let's see. Demented Liquor says getting to watch you two go live has made my day. Oh, thank you.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Jim Nugent says, thanks for the great opportunity to get to know Daisy. Very interesting conversation. If Tulsi would drop her anti-gun and Medicare for all positions, I would vote for her. That does seem to be a pretty common sentiment, actually.
Yeah.
Let's see. Nicholas Smith, thank you. And that looks like that is the last one. Okay, so to finish it up, thanks for being on the show. Would you like to tell everyone where they can find all of your wonderful work and glorious things?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that opportunity. You can obviously, if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's just Daisy Cousens. Just type it into YouTube and you will find it. I would love to have you there. You can follow me on Twitter at Daisy Cousens and Instagram at Miss Daisy Cousens. And then my Facebook is Daisy Cousens Writer, I think, something like that. But again, you'll find me. Just type me in. So join me on my platforms. I would love to have you, and we will have some fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, for being here, and like I said, for being my first stranger that I talked to.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for asking me. It's been really fun. It's been lovely to chat. And look, when I would love to start doing live stream interviews with people. So when I get my act together and do that, please come on my live stream. This has been really fun.
Absolutely. This has been great. And actually, you were really easy to talk to, and we have many things in common, actually.
We do. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, hopefully we get to meet in person one day. That'd be great.
That would be pretty cool. All right, guys. So that is it for today. We'll do the well, everyone, thanks for tuning in, for sticking around, especially for the extra time here. And I don't think anyone made any cannibalism jokes, so that's great. That's a common thing around here. We're a little debauchery. So again, thanks for tuning in. And the outro line, thank you for helping me spread the message of liberty.